Tony, before the show starts, I think you need to tell folks we're on social media.
I do. We're on social media.
Well, there you go. We're now on Facebook and Instagram, and it's at Going Hollywood Pod on both of those.
So that's our handle, at Going Hollywood Pod, on both Facebook and Instagram.
And what are we posting, Tony?
And we're going to just be posting, we'll talk about the show occasionally, but mostly it's just going to be like, what's happening? Who's a birthday? Who do we want to talk about and commemorate today? Who died? Because that happens a lot. It'll be fun.
So it's at Going Hollywood Pod, and it's Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the show notes or on the website, goinghollywoodpodcast.com. You'll find them there too.
Go on, stay tuned.
Come, dear, we must pack. Catherine, you haven't time for that.
There's not much left to do.
But you can finish it afterwards.
I must finish it now, for I shall never do another.
No.
He came back with the same lies, the same silly phrases.
What are you saying?
He has grown greedier with the years. The first time he only wanted my money. Now he wants my love, too. Well, he came to the wrong house, and he came twice. I shall see that he never comes a third time.
Catherine, do you know what you're doing?
Yes.
Can you be so cruel?
Yes, I can be very cruel. I have been taught by masters.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maeda.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
Tony, we took a week off, so it's good to see you again. How are things going?
Don't be kind to me, Brad. It doesn't become you.
Excuse me?
Oh, you have found a tongue at last, only to say such terrible things to me.
How can you be so cruel, Tony?
Yes, I can be very cruel. I have been taught by masters. I think my voice is not quite as deep as Olivia de Havilland's in that. Yes, I can be very cruel. I have been taught by masters. Ooh, I got chills when I said that.
There are so many quotes from this film. I was really amazed when I did a search for quotes from this film, and there weren't that many listed. I'm like, good God, I need to find some time to write some down.
Well, obviously, I just was quoting. I was giving all the big quotes from our movie of today, The Heiress, from 1949. It's Paramount 1949, starring Olivia de Havilland, Ralph Richardson, and Montgomery Clift, and Miriam Hopkins. I want to get Miriam Hopkins in there because I love her.
Yes, please do.
So this is, I'm kind of surprised, listener. This was Brad's idea, which I was kind of stunned because they're usually my ideas when these things. And this was Brad's idea. And Brad, you'd never seen it, correct?
No, I'd never seen it. First of all, I want to make a clarification. I don't just watch Marvel films and Star Wars or whatever. I love old films. I love new films. I just try to pull you forward a little bit is why I push them a little bit. But no, I don't remember what episode it was, but I was researching for an episode that we did. I don't know the movie. Mm-hmm. And I stumbled on this somehow, and I started reading about The Heiress, and I'm like, I have never heard of this film.
Wow.
At least I don't remember it. So I thought, okay, I read it again. I'm like, we'll have to do this because it sounds good, and I've never seen it. And I'm sure Tony has, no doubt there. Mm. And that's when I said, hey, let's do The Heiress. Like,
well,
okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have a soft spot in my heart for The Heiress. And because, and this is something that you don't know, Brad, because in my previous lifetime, I played Morris Townsend in a wonderful production of The Heiress. And yeah. And so, because The Heiress, the film we're talking about, is based on a play which is suggested by, not based on, the novel Washington Square by Henry James. So The Heiress is really, besides the fact that I love this film and God knows I love the performances, especially Miss de Havilland. Yeah, I played Morris, so I kind of have a soft spot for Morris. I think Morris is an okay guy. I don't care what anybody says. Not a fortune hunter at all, or gold digger.
Unless I want to tell you, Tony's nervous because before we hit the record button, he said, "I love this movie. I'm really afraid of what you're going to say about it."
I don't want an Alice Adams episode again, where I'm like, "Ooh," trying to dodge these insults about Alice Adams. But no, hey, that's what this is about. This is a conversation, an unscripted conversation about a film. So if you like it, if you don't like it, I'm just saying I will take it personally with this film. But go ahead, Brad. What do you want to say?
Well, first I want to do a spoiler alert. We said we don't do spoilers, but this movie, it needs a spoiler alert.
Right.
It has so many twists and turns in it. And it's all psychological. It's all character. The one thing you can say about this movie is nobody is two-dimensional in any way, shape, or form. The other thing before we get into the movie, I want to make a quick apology to our Canadian friends because 2 weeks ago, I told y'all you need to step it up because...
Did they?
The UK is ahead of you. You know why I thought that? Because towns in the UK tend to stand out. Whereas towns in Canada look more like what we have in the United States. So when I really looked at it, no, we have a whole lot more Canadians than we have people in the UK. We love you all, but...
We love you all. I love Canadians.
Canada, you're doing great. Of course, we'd always love you to tell your friends so we have more. And same thing to you UK folks. Okay.
I love Canada. I love the UK. I think they're fabulous. So thanks for sticking with us through these episodes. I forgot to mention, probably one of the most important things about The Heiress is that it is directed by probably my favorite director of classic Hollywood, none other than Mr. William Wyler, who directed such incredible films as The Best Years of Our Lives, The Little Foxes, Jezebel, Funny Girl, and Mr. Wyler has the distinction of leading more actors and actresses to Oscars than any other director. 12. He led 12 actors, actresses to Oscars.
One of them, the lovely Miss Olivia de Havilland.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, I take that back. It wasn't 12, it was 14. 14 actors.
Even better.
Yeah, I was doing the 12 nominations. Wyler holds the record for 12 nominations as Best Director. He's won 3. He won 3 Best Director Oscars, but he led actors to 14 wins, including de Havilland, as you said, including Barbra Streisand, including Audrey Hepburn in her film debut, Roman Holiday, Bette Davis in Jezebel. So yes, when we're talking about mythic, classic Hollywood directors, Wyler is right at the top.
Well, and I did forget to tell you, when I first saw about this film and I read what it's about and I read the actors, it got my attention. And then when I read that it was a romance, drama, gothic film. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I will say it was not gothic. I don't know where they got that from. This was not a gothic
that's
film.
Not quite right.
No.
That's Wuthering Heights that Wyler also directed.
I really love the Wuthering Heights.
Well, Wyler directed that.
Sorry?
Wyler directed that too.
Wuthering Heights?
Yeah.
Wuthering Heights is one of the movies I will not watch, not because I told you I try to separate movies from novels. The pictures of the characters in the novels are so clear and distinct to me, I don't want to end up seeing them after watching the movie.
Sure.
Same thing with The Grapes of Wrath. It's my only other movie. I adore The Grapes of Wrath. I know Henry Fonda's in it, and I don't want to see Henry Fonda when I read the novel. So both of those I do not watch. So I love Wuthering Heights, and because I won't watch it, I thought, okay, well, good. I get to see a gothic romance. Well, it's not gothic, but do you want to know my feelings on this, Tony?
Why not? Let's get it out. Let's get it over with.
Spectacular.
Oh, good. Thank God. Oh, I can relax now.
Spectacular.
Monty, Livy, we can relax. Brad likes us. He really likes us.
I don't know if Monty was around. I don't know if he could relax with me around, but that's a whole different story.
Mr. Clift, yes. Just one of the many reasons to watch this film. Mr. Montgomery Clift in his 3rd film. This is only his 3rd movie. So it's pretty amazing. And he was already well on his way. I mean, he was already hot by the time he did the Heiress. He actually been doing, Montgomery Clift started in the mid-30s as an actor, and he turned down films for over 10 years before he started making films because he was so incredibly choosy about what he wanted to do, and he had definite ideas. But we'll get into that later. We'll get into that. Let's talk a little bit about the movie, right? Do you want to discuss what the Heiress is about,
Sure.
and then we can go into some of the production history and all that stuff?
Absolutely. As
Great.
Tony and I have already said, it's a 1949 romance drama, and it is adapted from the play, which is based on the novel Washington Square. And for those, Washington Square is in New York City, currently Greenwich Village. I don't know if that was what it was called at that time.
Yes.
The story takes place in 1840. The book was published in 1880.
Mm-hmm.
It stars Olivia de Havilland as Catherine. She is a shy young woman from a wealthy family who falls for a handsome young man named Morris, who's played by Montgomery Clift. Her emotionally abusive father believes Morris is only after her for her inheritance, and he will not approve of their marriage. Now, it sounds pretty simple, and I guess the basis of the story is pretty simple, but the emotions are very tangled. There is nothing simple about this movie.
There is nothing.
As far as the characters go, in any way, shape, or form.
No. In fact, go ahead.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say Wyler had meant some of the famous things well, maybe not famous things, but some of the things that Wyler.
I was going to say one.
Oh, you go ahead then. If you got one, go.
Okay.
Go for it.
So anyway, and to emphasize that, I'm going to give a quote that Wyler said when this movie was released, because it really pegs what this movie is. He said, "The emotion and conflict between two people in a drawing room can be as exciting as a gun battle, and possibly more exciting." And he proves it with this film.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, and it's true, because it's very true. The thing about Wyler is that Wyler found the drama in the domestic. And exactly what you said, the conflict can be more, it can be, the emotion and the conflict can be bigger when you're that closed off, when you're in that enclosed space. It actually heightens it. And Wyler does so many amazing things with this film that just that push that home. Wyler uses a lot of mirrors in this film. The Heiress it's based on the play, so there's a possibility of it. People saying, "Oh, it's too stagey." I never feel that way about the Heiress because of the way
I didn't feel that
Wyler
way at all.
The way Wyler uses spaces. He uses mirrors to elongate, mirrors to reflect. Very frequently in the Heiress, people are not addressing each other directly. They're talking to the person's reflection in the mirror. So they're removed. So they're not really confronting the people. Usually this is Catherine and her father. They're not really confronting the source of the tension. He also uses Wyler is very famous for this, stairways. There's more drama on a William Wyler stairway, I think, than there is in any John Ford battle film. I mean, think about it. Think about The Little Foxes. Now, I don't know if you've seen The Little Foxes, but there's a very famous scene where a character basically dies on a staircase while Bette Davis stays in sharp focus in the front, not moving a muscle. Herbert Marshall, who plays her husband, collapses on the stairway because he needs his medicine, and she's not going to lift a finger to get it. There's the stairway in The Letter where Bette Davis shoots her lover to death. It's always Bette Davis, but there you go. She loved Wyler. And there's the staircase in The Heiress, where so much of Catherine's motivation, so much of Catherine's Catherine's inner life is depicted on these staircases. And we'll talk about them when we get to it. But I'm really glad that you said that's spectacular, Brad, because those are my feelings about this film too. This film, I've seen this film many, many times, and this film never bores me for a single second.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think people watching it, they may find it slow. I found myself thinking it was slow, but it's not. It's because if this was made today, it would have been a much different movie. I kept watching these films, and I kept watching these very complex characters, and I kept thinking of it in terms of today, and I kept thinking of all the stereotypes and the tropes that they would have used today. It is one of the most interesting things I found about this movie, and I've told you this before, I love a film that does not give me a happy ending. And the reason is because it's unexpected.
Right.
I like to be surprised. I was heartbroken. I was very upset when this movie ended. I was like, I hate this film. But then once I calmed down, I'm like, no, it is as it should be.
Yes, yes. Well, I have read that it is one of the most uncompromising endings in a film ever. And that's very true.
Well, this film, it's made a lot of money since then, but it was a box office bomb, and I am almost certain the ending had a lot to do with it.
I wouldn't say bomb. Okay. Don't say bomb. It didn't
bomb.
Make
any money.
It was a humongous critical hit. It cost about $2 million and it made about $2 million. So we're back to the bringing up baby thing where you're kind of like, okay, but there are other costs involved. Certainly not so much as they are now, because you're talking about a studio that has the production costs built into publicizing this film. But it also was nominated for 8 Oscars and it won 4. So that's not a bomb. That is a critical success that eventually, yes, as the years went on and people began to reflect on this film and what it just the brilliance of this film and the brilliance of the structure of this film and the character, it certainly has grown in stature. And it's interesting to say if it was made today. You know, there was a remake, air quotes, of this, which was actually called Washington Square, which is the novel that this play and film are suggested by, not based on. And it was with Jennifer Jason Leigh and Ben Chaplin. And the thing about Washington Square is that it's not, you can't say the Heiress is based on it because there are definite differences in Washington Square, especially the ending. But we're not talking about Washington Square. We're talking about the Heiress. So yeah, I think that it's the ending. You're right. I don't think there could be a more satisfying ending, even though as we look at it, it might be considered an unhappy ending. But is it? I mean, Catherine is the hero of her own liberation here. You know, I mean, yeah, it's a hard-won victory, and no champagne corks are popping at the end of this film. However, you get a real sense of victory from Catherine at the end of this film, which I think is kind of, it's very dense and complex, which this entire film is. The entire film is.
Right, and that's one of the things I love about this film. And when I said it couldn't be made today, the father, for instance, he is very complex. He's not evil. He eventually learned to despise him.
Right.
But in the beginning, he's cruel in an emotional way. He's not a cruel in a physical way in any way. He's a cruel emotionally, but in the beginning, it's not as heavy-hitting. It's through really sharp, cruel comments, but they aren't like intentional. It's his inner thoughts coming out when they shouldn't be coming out, what he thinks of his daughter.
Right.
As compared to his wife. So I like the fact that he is not this evil mustache twirling villain. And when he tells her that she can't marry Morris, or he doesn't want her to marry Morris, you understand where he's coming from. I disagreed with him, but I totally, because he actually was very, are we getting hard of ourselves here?
What? We're getting ahead of ourselves? Well, no. We've been talking about 15 minutes, so.
The reasons, he treats Morris very respectfully. Yes. He actually likes Morris. He finds him witty, he finds him entertaining, he finds him intelligent.
Finds him impertinent.
Educated. He just doesn't have the motivation.
Yes.
And therefore, he doesn't believe that he is a good person for his daughter, and he believes Morris is after his daughter's money.
Well, yes.
But it's not like he didn't give the guy a chance.
He did.
And it's not the fact that Morris doesn't have money. That's not the problem. The problem is not that Morris didn't have money, because he did go to school, go to Europe, but he doesn't seem to have any plan on how to get ahead.
Well, no, he squandered his money. He squandered his fortune. According to Dr. Sloper, he squandered his fortune. Now, according to Morris, he didn't, or his sister. He expanded his horizons. He expanded his capabilities by spending his money. So you got to ask yourself that. But a lot of that has to do with Ralph Richardson. I mean, Ralph Richardson, because of the way Richardson plays him as a wounded man, not an evil man. A man who has been wounded by life. Obviously, Catherine's mother was a great love of his life. And it's intimated that she died in childbirth. Mm-hmm. In the play, he's much harder. But again, because of Ralph Richardson, because there's a certain quirkiness to Dr. Sloper with Ralph Richardson, the way he jangles the keys to wake her up, which was a choice of Richardson's when they were filming it. The way he looks at her, he doesn't look at her directly. You know, he is thinking of his daughter, but unfortunately, he's not giving any love to his daughter. He thinks he's doing the best for her, but he can't love her. So, as she says in the film, if you can't love me, you know, I don't think that Morris could have treated me any less kind than you've treated me. So what's the problem, dude? You know, why are you standing in my way? And in the book, Washington Square, he does disinherit her. Now, in the play and the film, they soften that to where he just threatens to disinherit her. But in the play, Washington Square, she still does not run off with Morris. That still happens. He deserts her. But she will not promise her father that after he dies, she won't go running after him, as she does in the film. She says the same thing. But in the play, in the book, Washington Square, he does disinherit her. She ends up with like a fifth of her income, which is still pretty good, you know. But it's not the great inheritance that she would have gotten had he not disinherited her.
Yeah, and listener, her total inheritance is $30,000, which
right.
I did the paperwork or the
did you
the figures.
Good, I did too.
It actually wasn't as much as I thought it would be. It's $1.1 million a year that she gets.
Still, nothing to sneeze
Nothing
at.
shabby, but I thought it would be much more than that.
And she would get 10 if he disinherited her. She would still get her mother's, which is 10. So
yeah, she was going to get 10. She already was going to get 10,000 a year. Still, so that would, I would guess, equal about, you know, 333,000, let's say.
Still a great deal of money. Still a great deal of money.
Yeah, nothing to shake a stick at.
Nothing to shake a stick at.
I would think Morris would have been happy with that as well.
Yeah, well, but not when you're expecting, you know, $1 million.
Over $1 million a year.
Yeah, exactly. So should I talk a little bit about the background of the Heiress and how this all came into being?
You know, that's probably what people are here for.
I don't know about that. Our pithy, unscripted banter. Meanwhile, where are my notes? So anyway, yes. So as I said, the Heiress was suggested by the Henry James novel Washington Square, made into a play by Ruth and Augustus Getz called The Heiress, and it starred Wendy Hiller, and it was a big hit on Broadway. And Olivia de Havilland had just recently secured her independence from Warner Brothers. And we can talk a little bit about the de Havilland decision and the things that Olivia de Havilland did for actors in perpetuity with the 7-year contract a little bit later. But basically, she was one of the great champions of almost the decline of the studio system. So she was looking she had already won one Oscar, and she was always now that she had her freedom, she was looking for other projects. And she saw the play on Broadway, and she knew that it was immediately for her because she identified with this story of this oppressed person constantly being underestimated, controlled, and unappreciated by those around her. It really resonated with her because that was pretty much her story at Warner Brothers. She was controlled, and she was underestimated, and she was unappreciated. So she knew the person that she wanted to direct this film was William Wyler, probably because of the Little Foxes, because the Little Foxes, starring her great friend Bette Davis, was a tremendous success. Wyler directed it. He went, saw the play, agreed with her. He wanted to do it. So Havilland was very excited about this. They needed to find someone to play the fortune hunter, and they came upon the 29-year-old Montgomery Clift, who, as I said, had just made his film debut as Red River. He had just done The Search, and this would have been his third film. Now, Clift was 29, and de Havilland was 33, but I don't think that's an issue with the film. I think they seem perfectly well suited age-wise. Mm-hmm. So the production began, and you know the interesting thing is this, and I talked a little bit about this. The big question is Morris out for her money or not? What was your first initial idea, Brad, when you first saw it? Because you're in an enviable position here that this was the first time you saw this film. So did you think this guy's a fortune hunter, or did you think, oh, he's misunderstood?
I thought he was misunderstood.
Interesting.
I still question. I know what the author's intent was, but my feeling is he is just a free spirit. And mm-hmm. I'll tell you this: when she turned him away,
yeah,
when he left her. when she said, that my father's going to disinherit me and that sort of thing, I thought his not coming back was an act of love, that he didn't want to come between her and her father.
Well, then he fooled you too.
Yes. I was sad for her because I thought that's really cruel.
Because that's his
That
line.
he didn't tell her why.
Right.
But I
right.
thought for sure that's why he didn't.
One of the big reasons why you think that, if I may be so bold as to make an assumption for you,
Sure.
is because it's Montgomery Clift. Because we have a character, I've said this before, I call it padding a character. Actors bring certain qualities of their own individual personality to a part they play, no matter what part they play. They bring part of their baggage. And one of Montgomery Clift's attributes, qualities, was his soulfulness. He's a very sensitive, soulful actor. Even at this point, third film, he has that quality. He also has a very contemporary quality, which can be problematic, but we can talk about it. Wyler actually got him a tutor to teach him how to stand, how a man who was born 100 years before stood. And you know what? I had the same problem, too, when I played Morris. I kept putting my hands in my pockets. And my director would say, take your hands out of your pockets. Take your hands out of your pockets. It's just, different way of holding yourself. So anyway, in the play, he's much more mercenary. In the play, it's a little more obvious that he's a fortune hunter. But in the film, and that's one wonderful thing about the film is Clift's incredible softness, his soulfulness, you want him to be a good man. I mean, you feel for him at the end. Think about if this had been Jack Palance, or even Kirk Douglas, who were both making movies at this time. In fact, Jack Palance played a very similar role in that Joan Crawford film, Sudden Fear. Would we have a question of whether or not he was a fortune hunter, or would we just know, no, he's definitely a fortune hunter? But Clift makes us guess. Clift keeps us guessing, and that's one of the brilliant, complex things about this film.
Well, I agree. Well, he's very charming, just very charming. He's not just handsome. He's charming. He's fun. And that's the way scoundrels are, the ones that are successful.
Exactly.
To get a little very, very quick backstory. I worked at a place where a woman, I worked in a hotel, and we had a guest that stayed at the hotel, and I'm going to try and make this very quickly. She basically had this whole scam developed with fake bodyguards and being chased by the mob and all this other stuff. And fortunately, I was seeing through her. Nobody was listening to me. So I am rather proud of myself. She scammed a bunch of my coworkers from tons of money.
Oh, dear.
Some went bankrupt because of her money. She ended up being wanted in 11 states.
Oh, my God.
She was successful because she was so damn likable.
Yeah. Well,
had she not been likable, she would not have snowed them all.
Well, yes, you're right. That is a true sign of a sociopath, but also of somebody who can get away with this kind of stuff. So, yes, I think a lot of it really, really has to do with Clift's performance. I mean, with Clift's the qualities of Montgomery Clift, which bled through, as we know now, into every one of his films, into A Place in the Sun, into From Here to Eternity. I mean, just as he went on, into The Misfits, even all the way up to near the end of his career. Another reason why I think we like Morris is because of Miriam Hopkins. Miriam Hopkins plays Aunt Penniman, who is Dr. Sloper's widowed sister. And, the marvelous Miriam Hopkins. What's interesting about this film is that it was made in 49. 49, you can kind of say 49 is like smack in the middle of classic Hollywood. You have an actress, Miriam Hopkins, who is very closely identified with pre-code, with the early 30s. She was a wonderful star in the early 30s, and also a wonderful thorn in the side of Bette Davis, because if we ever want to talk about a feud, it wasn't Crawford and Davis, it was Miriam Hopkins and Davis. Oh. Because they did some films together, and Betty could not stand her. Okay, so you have Miriam Hopkins, who's kind of from the old 30s, and then you have the way of the future. You have Montgomery Clift, the new breed, if you will. Clift was really the first one of the new breed of actors coming to Hollywood, who then went to Brando and Dean, who kind of revolutionized film acting. So you have these two different distinct eras meeting in this film, and Olivia de Havilland is right between them, right in the middle of them. Do I need to tell anybody that Olivia de Havilland played Melanie in Gone with the Wind, or do we pretty much...
Well, now they know.
Now they know. I should probably have said that when I was talking about Olivia de Havilland.
And you made me think of something I wanted to bring up, but I want to go back to Miriam Hopkins as Lavinia. I'm not really familiar with her. I absolutely loved her as Lavinia. I would say that if there was ever a two-dimensional character in this film, it would be very easy to pinpoint it as her. But if you really looked at the film again, not true.
No.
Because she really had to play the goalie between loving her brother and loving her niece, or was she her mother's sister or the father's sister?
Austin Sloper's, her Dr. Sloper's sister.
Okay, so it was his sister.
Yes.
Yeah, so she was kind of having to play the referee between the two and knowing when each was wrong, but loving both of them. So that was really well done.
Yes, yes.
Very, very believable.
Well, also,
I loved and adored her in this film. So I don't know her. Please tell me that she's not a royal bitch in real life.
She was problematic. She was a royal bitch to Bette Davis because she was.
Well, that's excusable.
Which is not surprising. Bette Davis got along with very few actresses. One of the actresses she did get along with, though, was Olivia de Havilland. She was as close to Olivia de Havilland as she was to any other actress. But that's because I have a very funny Olivia de Havilland Bette Davis story. I'm going to say it really quickly because I don't forget it.
Yeah,
so I
want to get back to.
we'll get back to the Heiress. So I saw Olivia de Havilland. The Academy was doing a celebration of Bette Davis's centenary, her 100th year. She was obviously not alive, but Olivia de Havilland was. And Olivia de Havilland was the surprise guest with Robert Osborne. And Robert introduces her, and the place went crazy. Oh, my God, it's Olivia de Havilland. She told a very funny story about Bette Davis. And she said, Betty always liked to play Scarlett O'Hara to my Melanie Wilkes. And then she stopped and she turned out to the audience and she said, but I really was Melanie Wilkes. Anyway, we can probably cut that. So anyway, but what I want to say about, the thing about the character of what Miriam Hopkins brings to the character of Aunt Penniman is, again, some complexes. There's a scene where she's talking about, because she's a widow, but she's been a widow for years, but she's always in black. And I think she says when they're on their way to the engagement party where Catherine first meets Morris, I'm just as grief-stricken wherever I am. And then she laughs. I mean, that's the kind of thing. She's like, is it appropriate for me to go to this party? Oh, I'm just as grief-stricken wherever I am. And so that's the thing. These characters are so complex. They're so layered. And yeah, she's a bit of a nudge. She's a bit of a busybody, but she's also Catherine's confessor. Thank God that woman is in this house. Otherwise, how has Catherine survived this long in this loveless home is beyond me. Thank God she's got Aunt Lavinia to help her. Aunt Lavinia is very much a romantic. She's the one who wants Catherine and Morris to be together, even though she probably suspects that Morris is after her money as well as everybody else. But what the hell? He's a good-looking guy, and he might treat her better than her father is treating her, so why not? I mean, it's a very valid point.
Can't be much worse. Tony, you and I get excited when we get messages and emails and texts from listeners that tell us how much they enjoy the show.
We do.
But I think we should push it a little bit and ask them to go a little bit further.
Ooh, challenge.
If you enjoy this show, let others know. 5 stars are great, whatever you want to give, except 1 star. If you have 1 star, say, that show's not for me and move on.
Yeah, you don't give us 1 star. Just say, no, not for me. Just skip it. Or tell your friends. That's the best way too, right? Tell your friends, hey, I have this great fun podcast with these 2 kooky guys who talk about movies and TV. We run the gamut. We have everything.
Yeah, we're all over the place.
We're all over the place is a better way to put it.
But in a good way. So do it right now before you forget.
So anyway, I think one of the things I love about this film, if we can talk about a couple of these scenes, I think probably one of the most well-known things about the Heiress, and one of the main reasons that Olivia de Havilland won the Best Actress Oscar for this performance is her physicality. Now, Olivia de Havilland was one of the most beautiful women in the world. I mean, she was Maid Marian, for Christ's sake, in Robin Hood. I mean, she was a beautiful, beautiful woman. So how do you have this beautiful woman, this legendarily beautiful woman, play this part of this wallflower, of this unattractive, awkward girl? Well, they did makeup. They gave her a very unflattering hairstyle, part in the middle. She looks like she has, her demeanor is very pallid, but de Havilland does it all in her body language. how she hunches, how awkward she
Her
is,
face
how
and her body.
gauche she is. And you buy it. I mean, even Wyler said, it was kind of hard for us to pull over the fact that Olivia de Havilland is unattractive, but because of the physical thing she did with her performance, she was able to project that idea, which I love. As an actor, I love that. I love when actors do that.
And see, I felt a little bit different about her looks because I'm sitting there watching it and I'm like, Olivia de Havilland is playing this plain Jane, not homely, but just not, kind of just a plain looking woman. And I started thinking about Gone with the Wind, and Melanie, even though I've never watched Gone with the Wind from beginning to end, I know the whole movie.
Right.
Melanie has always been my favorite character because I tend to like the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very sad about Melanie's life. And, she's in Scarlet's shadow most of the time. And so I thought, okay, she did that character, she did this character, and I thought, I always think of Olivia de Havilland as a knockout. So let me look. And I looked up her pictures. She's very pretty, but I was actually expecting much more than she is.
Well, have you seen
I will
her?
say her older pictures.
Yeah.
And she was a beautiful older woman.
She was a beautiful woman, period. I mean, have you seen Robin Hood? Have you seen her in Robin Hood?
I have, but it was ages ago. So I will have to go watch it.
You have to look at the 30s films.
Okay.
By the 40s when she had her freedom and she was doing all kinds of parts like the Snake Pit and the Dark Mirror, she was able to, and the Heiress, she was able to play with her looks, but stunningly beautiful. In The Private Lives of Elizabeth in Essex, one of her films she made with Bette Davis, gorgeous woman. But here's another thing that de Havilland does, which I love, and we talked about this a little bit with Streetcar Named Desire, is her voice. That's probably the most well-known thing that de Havilland did, because in the early scenes, she's very breathy, she's very flighty, everything is up here, oh Morris, oh Morris, oh Morris. And then when Morris leaves her, we get the first hint of the devastation, and we get the first hint of this, of the pain that Catherine is feeling, and her voice begins to drop. And in the scene after Morris is gone and she's with her father, her voice suddenly begins to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And if you watch that scene, you'll notice that many of Olivia de Havilland's lines are looped, which means she went in after filming and dubbed in her lines. I think most likely because she wanted to get that sense of depth, that sense of pain. And then so by the final act, when it's been a couple years and Morris comes back and her father is dead and she is now a very substantial woman of means, she's got Agnes Moorehead type delivery. Her voice is very deep and very commanding. And this is a woman that you do not want to fuck with. And that's, as an actor, I love when actors do that. It's so technical, but it puts across so much in just that little detail. And that was very important to de Havilland, that she do that. And obviously to Wyler, because it comes across beautifully. You get that strength.
And it wasn't just her voice.
Yes.
Who we see at the beginning of the film is exactly looks like the person we see at the end of the film, yet looks totally different.
Yes. Yes.
It's quite amazing. Her face and the way she carries herself are worlds apart, even though you're looking at the same person. She deserved the award, hands down.
Well, yes, and she does. She's not suddenly prettier. It's not like she became, the ugly duckling turned into a swan. She looks physically the same, but she doesn't carry herself the same. She doesn't harumph around a room. She is very much in control. She's very still. She's very concise with her movements. And I think one of the most interesting things I find in that scene after Morris has left is Morris has said to Dr. Sloper at one point, because Dr. Sloper says that you're taking advantage of a weak girl. And Morris says, I don't think Catherine is weak. And you realize at the end, she's not. She's not weak at all. She's just like her father. Mm-hmm. I have been taught by masters. If Dr. Sloper had only realized that instead of constantly comparing her to her mother and said, well, no, this girl's very much like me in her strength and her determination, which allows her to do what she does at the end of the movie. So I think that's amazing to me that you come to that realization. Oh, it's not just because she's been jilted by Morris. This is who she is. This act just brought it forward until at the end, she's just as uncompromising as Dr. Sloper.
You know, I said he wasn't cruel at the beginning, but you could just see the pain he was inflicting on her. But he kept referring, basically, if you think of somebody that, you know, they're not as good as their brother, that's basically she was with her mother.
Yeah.
Well, she's not her mother. She wasn't as pretty as her mother. She wasn't as gay as her mother. She wasn't as witty as her mother. And it just kept coming out. It was not like a direct, you're nothing like your mother. It was just these little offhanded remarks all the time.
Well, you know, when
so little daggers,
you know,
all her life.
Well, exactly. Dr. Sloper, Richardson would say the nastiest things to her, but in that kind tone.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not really sure. Was that an insult? What? No, it doesn't sound like one because everything was like this. You know, it's really interesting, the choices that he made, which also led to this, you know, and you can't escape. I want to talk a little bit about William Wyler. You know, William Wyler, 40 take Willie is what they used to call him,
Mm-hmm.
because he was a perfectionist. And I think that's probably the reason why de Havilland wanted him, because this was so important to her. And she wanted someone she could completely trust. I mean, he was Bette Davis's favorite director. And we all know, if you know anything from our Baby Jane podcast, you know, Bette Davis was a handful. She adored Wyler because he was as much a perfectionist as she was. So 40 take Wyler, and it wasn't like Wyler would get with his actors. We've talked about other directors like Sidney Pollack, who would get with the actor and really give them their motivation and talk to them about character development. No. Henry Fonda told a story about they were doing a scene from Jezebel, and he had him do it like 40 times. And all Wyler would say would be again. And Fonda finally asked him for guidance, and Wyler said, "It stinks." That was his guidance, but he got it. Streisand says the same thing about Wyler and Funny Girl. He was not a communicative director, but he just led you. He just guided you to this performance. And that scene when Morris leaves, you know, he's not showing up, and she goes back up the stairway with her suitcase. Mm-hmm. And you know how she plods up. They did that over 50 times until finally Olivia de Havilland was so infuriated, she threw the suitcase at Wyler, and he picked it up and he realized, oh, I know what the problem is. So he filled it with books. So don't throw a suitcase at a director or you're really going to pay. So when she plods up that suit, look at her. If you haven't watched this movie, listener, when you're watching it, look at her face when she's going up that staircase. In the play, there's a whole big scene about where she has a breakdown, where she's crying about how nobody loves me, my mother didn't love me, nobody loves me. That's not in the play. That's not in the movie because it's not needed. Mm-hmm. Because you get it all in de Havilland's face, in the way she's walking up that stairway, carrying the books, as it turns out, in that suitcase. It's amazing. And this is the kind of thing that Wyler did. This is why 14 actors won Oscars under Wyler, because he could do things like this, and actors loved him for it.
Something I'm curious about. Were you in the play or did you see the movie first?
I had seen the movie. I saw the movie years ago.
When did you see, what was your first introduction into the film?
And to watch the Heiress?
Yeah.
I'm sure it was on videotape. You know, that's usually the way that I saw movies back then. I might have been on television. I doubt it. I'm sure I probably sought it out because, you know, I was acting. So I knew about this play, and I knew this was maybe a part I would want to play someday. And it turned out it happened. But I'm sure it was probably, yeah. I don't think it wasn't in a theater, unfortunately. I don't think I've ever seen the film in a theater, which is sad because I think in a theater it would be incredible.
Oh, it would be gorgeous.
It's amazing.
I'm asking because I'm curious what your feelings were about Morris.
When I first saw it,
yeah,
like yours. I'm so enamored of Clift. You know, how can you not be in love with this man? I mean, he's not only incredibly beautiful, but he's so soulful and vulnerable. That was the thing about Clift. That was what was new about Clift. That was what was exciting to audiences about Clift. This new type of leading man who had a softness, who had a vulnerability. You know, he wasn't Clark Gable. God knows. He wasn't Gary Cooper, who barely, you know, said 3 words. He was a soulful young man. And, you know, you can see it in it. Same thing with Brando. Same thing with Dean, that was that whole thing. But, Clift, I want to clarify something too. And I said in our Streetcar Named Desire episode, Clift was not a method actor. He actually denigrated the method. He didn't understand it. He always said that what this quote unquote method is what any good actor does instinctively. Brando said the same thing. Brando was not a method actor. So they kind of get lumped in with these method actors. And no, that wasn't them at all. They were taught by people who use facets of the method, but no, he was a new style of actor because he plugged into his sensitivity, because he thought about a role. However, here's an interesting thing. De Havilland said, talking about working with Clift, because it was not a happy working experience for Olivia de Havilland, even though she wanted William Wyler to direct her in this film, and she was very excited. She also said that he treated her very badly on the set. He and Ralph Richardson would completely ignore her at times and just, dismiss her. And she's like, but I'm Olivia frickin' de Havilland. I put this whole thing together. But think about that for a minute. It makes perfect sense. What is Catherine feeling? Overlooked, ignored. Another genius thing that Wyler did. So he put his actors through the ringer because he knew that is what he wanted to get out of her for Catherine. But she also said that working with Clift was very difficult because he would rehearse, he would go over, he would basically figure out everything he was going to do the night before, which as an actor, you're taught you don't do that. You leave yourself open to the spontaneity of the moment. Clift seemed to have everything planned out, and Clift wasn't really acting with her, she said. He was acting with his acting coach, who was on the other side of the soundstage, and he would always look to the acting coach after a scene. And then she realized, well, what is Morris doing in this play, in this film? He's acting. So that makes perfect sense. So Clift is not going to be spontaneous in the scene with her. As Morris, he's doing what Montgomery Clift did as an actor. He's got his moves pre-planned. He's got his motivations pre-planned. So it's really kind of amazing when you think about how these people created these characters that just made this all the richer in its tapestry.
And that's where I was taken in, because what I loved about Morris was his spontaneity. The fact that he took off to Europe and didn't worry, had a good time while he spent his...
The character's spontaneity.
Hmm?
The character's spontaneity.
Yes. This character's spontaneity.
Exactly.
He took off to Europe and had a good time. And his impulse to just quickly marry her right after they met.
But he did that in his life, but he's not spontaneous with Catherine. He's not spontaneous in their scenes together. Think of some of the things he said. You're like, dude, slow your roll. When Ralph Richardson, when Dr. Sloper compliments him on his cologne, he's like, here, we'll have it. And he's like, no, that's okay. I'm not going to take your cologne. I'm like, dude. And he calls he says, why wouldn't I call on an attractive girl and her attractive father? And Ralph Richardson looks at him like, okay. I mean, you want to say Morris, slow your roll, dude. Be cool. Because he's got all of this stuff planned out. But you don't really realize it, I think, the first time you're watching it. You have to watch it again to really see the machinations of Morris Townsend.
And, there's little hints of it. Like, one thing I kept getting so uncomfortable, Americans, we're used to our space. We want our space. And not all cultures are like that. Some get really in your face. And the whole time he kept talking to Catherine, he was like right in her space, and you could see how uncomfortable she was. And I'm like, dude, hold back. That's really an improper for 1840, And
yes, until he kisses her.
Yes.
If you notice, once he kisses her, she is right back in his face from then on, and she immediately says, "I love you." Immediately, that one kiss. Mm-hmm. And another brilliant thing about this film. Yeah, he is. You're right. He's right up in her face until he gets the result he wants, and then he doesn't have to worry about it.
He's trying to throw off his prey.
Yeah, exactly. So when you really look at it, so when he comes back, this is my difference. So I think in the first half, he is after her money. He doesn't have any money. He could go out and get a job, but he's thinking, I look like Montgomery Clift. I don't need to go work. So I'll get some money from somewhere. So he is. But I really think, and this is the way I approached it as an actor. The way I approached it was that, yeah, I was a little mercenary. I was thinking, although it's dangerous when you're an actor to think anything negative about your character, because we don't think negative things about ourselves, so why would they? But then when he comes back after all those years and he has not made a success in California, And she even says it, he's grown greedier over the years. The first time he just wanted my money. Now he wants my love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how she knows that her ultimate, screw you at the end, bolt the door, Mariah, bolt it, is really going to affect him, because now he is loving her. Now he's a little desperate, and he is loving her. So I think that when he comes back, I think he really does want a life with her, because he realizes after a few years, flummoxing around California, that he had it really good and he screwed it up.
Yeah. And see, I was still pulling for him, and I thought for sure he was going to come back. He wasn't necessarily wealthy, but had made a good life for himself, and he was coming back for her to finally prove himself to her father.
Yeah.
I really did not want to dislike this guy. So I was kind of bummed out at the end. I kind of want to go back to how cruel this father was, because, we said that it was like small daggers, but there is that scene where he just lets it out. And it's one of the cruelest things. It just crushed her, but actually made her stronger in some way.
In the end. But you notice how she deflates? You notice how de Havilland just, when he says those things, those terrible things to her, she just deflates. Her whole body goes down. It's a stunning choice.
Yeah, and it's a long quote, but I want to say it because it really emphasizes what this guy is like. Mm-hmm. This is after Catherine, when she's planning to marry Morris.
Right.
And her father basically says, well, why would he want you? And she said, why wouldn't he? Then the father says, your gaiety and brilliance will make up the difference between the 10,000 a year you will have and the 30,000 he expects. And he said, he does not love me for that. And then the quote again, the father, quote, what else then? Your grace, your charm, your quick tongue and subtle wit?
Yes.
Catherine, I've tried for months not to be unkind, but now it's time for you to realize the truth. 100 women are prettier, 1,000 are more clever, and you have one virtue that outshines them all, your money. You have nothing else. I've known you all your life, and I've yet to see you learn anything except one exception, my dear. You embroider neatly. How cruel.
Yeah. And she says, what a terrible thing to say to me. And that's the first time her voice drops.
Yes.
That's the first time she hits a lower register, because she's been assaulted by his words, but she's also realizing the real tragedy of the heiress is this is a woman who realizes that the men in her life don't love her.
Mm-hmm.
No one in her life loves her. Her aunt, okay. But the two main men, the men that she has basically lived for up to this point, do not love her. And that is the true tragedy of Catherine Sloper and the heiress. So at the end, when Morris comes back and she makes him think that she's going to go away with him, and you notice how she gives him his buttons, the buttons she bought for him in Paris when they were on their European tour.
Yep.
That's the last thing that's the last thing she has that will ever remind her of him. And it's like, here you go. Goodbye. The last vestige of this unfortunate episode. So when she turns up that stairway, again, another William Wyler stairway. The last time we saw Catherine go up that stairway, she was plodding up, rejected with her luggage and looking like, like she'd been run over, like hit by a bus, which she had been. She walks up that stairway and, he's banging on the door behind her. Catherine, Catherine, Catherine. And she slowly ascends. And she gets a slight smile on her face. Mm-hmm. It's not a big smile, but it is a smile. You have to look very closely for it. And that says, this is a victory for this woman. This woman, yes, it's a horrible victory. It's a devastating victory, but it's a victory. She's going to live her life. She owns her life now. She owns her space. She owns herself. And that's why it's one of the most uncompromising endings of the era, but I think also one of the most satisfying, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it wasn't, it was the way she carried herself. Just, he's banging on the door. She calmly closes the curtains. She calmly turns the lamp down. She calmly goes up the stairs. And when I'm saying calmly, you can see the look on her face of that mix of anger and satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's not like crying or fury. It's just almost like gracefully destroying this man.
She is. Yeah. It's the ultimate revenge. It's the rejection. You know what I mean? And I don't want to call it a Pyrrhic victory, but it's pretty damn close to a Pyrrhic victory, but it's a victory nonetheless. And you just know she's going to be fine. You know, she's going to live her life. She's going to be that rich old lady in that mansion at Washington Square for the rest of her life. And she'll be just fine.
And that's where I'm not fine with it. You know, after her father died and they went, you know, a few years passed.
Yeah.
And then the children, and they're calling her Aunt Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at her, and I said, oh, she looks like the old maid, you know, the old lady that lives by herself, that makes cookies for the kids, and you know, but she's wealthy
with a shit ton of money.
And then I thought,
with a shit ton of money.
Well, she's got a shit ton of money, and then he comes back, and I'm like, oh, I mean, I don't like necessarily when the man saves the day, but that was the era.
Mm-hmm. And
then in the end, she does turn out to be probably the old woman that will be alone the rest of her life. Probably going to charity events and that kind of thing. I don't know, because she's very shy. So
no, not anymore. She just doesn't. She doesn't want to go out anymore. She says she enjoys her home. She enjoys her castle on Washington Square. When her cousin says, you know, you never go out. Come to Newport. I think it was Newport they go to for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I like the square. That's because that's her domain. That's where she is. That she doesn't have to worry about anybody else when she's there. And she really is the queen of her domain. So I don't know. I find kind of a resignation, a positive resignation in the ending of that. As I said, she is just declared her liberation. You know what? She is her own person.
One thing I'm confused about is at the end when Morris shows up at the door and he pretty much proposes to her again, and she said, yes, I'll meet you. You know, I'll meet you here at such and such a time or wherever. Mm-hmm. And so all the arrangements are made. They're gonna run off and get married, and he leaves. And before we know that she is tricking him and is not going to have anything to do with him, she sits down and starts going back to her embroidery.
Right.
And her aunt says, you need to get ready. Mm-hmm. And she says, no, something to the effect, I need to do this because I will do it no more.
Right. I'll never do it.
I'm like, well, if he's going away, why is she never going to do her embroidery again? Because I thought that to mean, okay, she's going to be married. And maybe that was just to throw us off, because I said, oh, she said she's never going to do it again because she's going to get married and doesn't have to embroider anymore.
Because she's turned the page. What does her father say to her? You have one good quality, you embroider neatly, yes. I think he says, or nightly. And she has this is her day of independence. That's over. She's turning the page. The old Catherine is completely gone. She came back to fool Morris, and that's now over. So she's like, and it's the very last thing in the way she stabs that needle into the embroidery. He came back with the same lies, the same foolish promises. And that's over. That part of her life is over. She is now on to the next chapter after Morris, after her father. This is now her life. Who knows what? She might end up in Europe. She might meet another fortune hunter and decide, okay, I'll spend my life with you. But that part of her life is over, and that you embroider neatly, that he says to her, is part of her old life. Gone, over with, done.
Now that you say it, it seems obvious. I'm almost embarrassed to ask.
No, it's, well, you know, again, I'm a film historian. I've studied this film a little bit. But no, I mean, it's remarkable. It's one of the really wonderfully complex things about this film that make it such satisfying viewing. And no, you're right. It wasn't a huge hit. It wasn't a flop. It was not a big moneymaker when it came out, but it's definitely grown in stature. And I think it's definitely, I mean, for de Havilland's performance alone, it is very, very important viewing. It's, you know, and it also won the score, the Aaron Copland score won, the production design, the costume design, gorgeous. They all won. Wyler was nominated, didn't win. Ralph Richardson was nominated, didn't win. But still, de Havilland, this is de Havilland's movie, you know, and thank God she won. She deserved it.
And while you're going over that, let's just jump into how this movie did. So
yes, please. How did this movie perform?
Okay. The budget of this film estimated $2.6 million. It earned in 1949 and 1950 $2.3 million. So it did lose a little bit. That's why I said it was a flop, which is really surprising considering how much, you know, it premiered at Radio City. The reviews were like outstanding. But since that time, Paramount has done well. They've earned $159 million off this movie.
Well,
so it was a long-term investment that paid off.
Definitely.
The critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is 100%. Audience score is 93%, which isn't surprising because there's a lot more audience score than critic score. Both of those are outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, it was nominated for 8 awards, including the Best Picture and Best Director, which it didn't get, but it did get the others. Now, I was looking at this year in films. It wasn't a year of bad films, but it wasn't a year of groundbreaking films that people will remember.
No.
All the King's Men may be one,
Yes.
but I think a lot of it's because there were a lot of war films this year.
Yeah.
So let me go over what the Best Picture and the highest grossing films were. The Best Picture was won by All the King's Men, and then others that were nominated in addition to the Heiress was Battleground, A Letter to Three Wives, and 12 O'Clock High.
Mm-hmm.
The highest grossing films, number 1 was Samson and Delilah, another Cecil B. DeMille movie. Then we have Battleground. Then we have Jolson Sings Again. But then we have 2 more war movies, Sands of Iwo Jima and I Was a Male War Bride. Heiress was the 8th top grossing film in this.
Oh, wow.
Year. So none of them are like, you don't sit and you pine over like 39 or
No.
some of the other years. I know there's
Those are some decent movies. I mean, A Letter to Three Wives is a wonderful film.
Right.
With Joseph L. Mankiewicz's, it's the precursor to All About Eve. So it's a wonderful film. I Was a Male War Bride is a wonderful film too. But yeah, it wasn't a mythic year in films. It's one of the reasons why, I think de Havilland absolutely deserved the Oscar for this. But I mean, she didn't have great competition. She had Loretta Young, I think, was one of her. I'd have to go and look it up who the other actresses nominated that year were. But I mean, she didn't have. It wasn't the year of Vivian Leigh in Streetcar Named Desire, which, by the way, was offered to de Havilland, and she turned it down. How about that? She didn't want to do Streetcar.
Oh, really?
I think she was probably like, I worked with one actor. Like, I don't need another one of these new breed of actors to work with. So yeah, she definitely deserved it. She deserved it. And can we just talk about de Havilland for a minute, who died in 2020 at the age of 104.
Wow.
I mean, that woman was incredible. The woman, it's funny when we watch these, she got older and she mostly talked about Gone with the Wind, but when she would talk about her career, very long, her speech became very elongated, very, very grand, so it's funny to see her when she's younger and she doesn't have quite that affectation. But, this was a woman who literally won the right, basically delivered actors from servitude, because before she sued Warner Brothers, what happened was after the fulfillment of her initial 7-year contract in 1943, she thought she was done. And then the studio said, oh, no, you're not done. You still owe us 6 more months because of all the suspensions you went on because of films you didn't want to make. So when you didn't want to make a movie, the studio would put you on suspension, and you would be on suspension for the exact amount of time it took to film that movie that you turned down. So contracts could go on and on and on. And now Betty Davis tried to do this in the 1930s, and she lost. She did not win this case. De Havilland heard from her lawyer that maybe you have a shot. So she did. She took Warner Brothers to court, and she won. And later, the Court of Appeals ruled in her favor. So the de Havilland law states the length of any personal services contract cannot be longer than 7 calendar years. Period. That doesn't just go for actors. That's any personal services contract. And it's a law. It's in the books. So you got to give this woman a credit, even if you're not an actor. I find that so incredible that she said, no, done. I'm fighting this. This is not going to happen. And it really changed Hollywood. It was really one of the very first cracks in the studio system. So anyway, I had to get that in there because I find that so incredibly wonderful about Olivia de Havilland.
So are you happy I liked it?
I'm very happy you liked it. I kind of thought that you would. I mean, it's not.
I'm glad you calmed your nerves.
I mean, come on. How could you not love it? How could you not love this film? Yeah, it could be. People could look at it as slow, but I hate that.
I could see a lot of people not loving this film. Some people really insist on a happy ending.
Well, they certainly.
I've read the book reviews on different books that don't have happy endings per se. Not necessarily bad, sad endings, but people want a storybook happy ending. And a lot of people don't like them.
Well, one of the things I love about this movie is, like life, It's a different kind of happy ending. It may not be the happy ending that we think we should have. But if you look long enough and you look hard enough, you find a certain satisfaction in the ending.
She freed herself.
She freed herself, and she is now her own person. So this is a lot of fun. I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad you suggested it. Thank you. I want to say that we got one more coming up, right? And then we're done with our first series.
One more, and then not another one till Christmas.
And then we have our special Christmas episode. So stay tuned for the next one coming up. I'm excited about it. It's one of Brad's favorite movies.
Yeah, I picked the next one too.
You did. You picked the last two. But I picked the previous 27.
And unlike Deadpool, people will watch this. You know, folks, Deadpool did not get as many hits as our other shows. Go and listen to it because you probably think, oh, it's Deadpool. You will be surprised Tony's take on Deadpool. So listen to it.
It was fun. It's actually a fun movie. So.
Tony was surprised.
I was surprised. You know, I always enjoy talking to you, Brad. So you know what? Let's not say goodbye. Let's just say au revoir.
No, Tony. Let's say goodbye.
Bolt the door, Mariah!
That's all, folks.